Right, let's make sure that that's working. Brilliant. Recording has started. Please remind me if we launch into a chat about children and I haven't stopped the recording, please remind me later on. Okay, welcome everybody to our workshop on executive function. I'm from the Early Years Southwest Stronger Practice Hub, and here's our website and our QR code, which you can use to go and check out everything that we've got on offer. There's more being added each day, so I strongly recommend that you go and have a look at some point. You can also check out what's on the other hub websites as well, and there's just a wealth of resources and support out there for you. We're just one of 18 hubs across the country supporting early years practice. And we're working really closely with the Education Endowment Foundation, and you can find the Early Years Evidence Store by following this QR code. And I'm going to talk a bit more about the Early Years Evidence Store a bit later on. We'll hopefully have time to have a look at one of their good practice videos. So the workshop that you're currently in, and if you're in the wrong workshop, just remove yourselves. I won't mind at all, but the one that you're currently in is executive function in the early years. I hope that's what you signed up for and what you were expecting today. If not, then you're free to slip away quietly. My name is Sarah Hercod and I'm the Area SENDCo. So the aims of today's session. I'm just going to double check the chat because sometimes issues crop up and I don't see them until it's too late. No, we're doing all right there. Brilliant. I don't want to be talking away and somebody can't hear me. If there is an issue, then please do unmute yourself and just call out. That's fine to stop me as I rattle on. So the aims of today's session are to understand the 3 executive functions, know how they develop, know why they're so important, and also the bit that I always go on training for is to take away that practical and playful support around what activities we can do with children to enhance their executive function. So let's make a start and have a look at what executive functions actually are. These are the skills that help us to work towards goals, organise information, adapt to different situations, do our daily tasks, and simply learn. We're not born with them, but we are capable of developing them. And acquiring them is fundamental to healthy brain development. So anything that goes on in the brain, I quite like to have an image or a picture, like if you do colourful semantics, of what, like something to compare it to that makes the whole process, because I'm not a brain scientist, that makes the whole thing slightly more tangible. And the one that gets used quite a lot that I'm going to borrow today is air traffic control. So executive functions are a bit like that tower on the airport runway that is monitoring the planes coming in, the planes going out, the capacity of the runways. So you've only got so many runways, you've got that many, no more, no less. They're keeping track of the flights, the delays, the landings. They're managing lots of things all at once. And if we think about that in terms of the little ones that we work with, and then maybe think about us as well at the other end of the spectrum of development. So in terms of the little ones that we're working with, one example of when executive function is really needed is paying attention when it's noisy or there's distractions. And then if we think about ourselves, maybe we get home from work and we're cooking dinner whilst talking to our sister on the phone, whilst ordering something off Amazon, whilst feeding the dog, and maybe thinking about what we're going to do for work tomorrow. So it's about doing one thing whilst thinking about something else, and those coordinating actions in our brains. And executive function can take longer to develop than other early years functions. So why do we need them? We need them to do all of the things shown here. So we need them to be focused, we need them for perseverance, decision making, prioritising, remembering, being independent, doing things by ourselves, being creative, managing the big feelings that inevitably come along every day, planning, problem solving, waiting and turn taking. And there's 3 of them. So if you take nothing else away with you from today's training, I just want you to be able to remember that there are 3 distinct executive functions. So let me talk you through them. I'm sorry if you can hear my dog joining in. She's downstairs telling me that she wants to come up. So the first one I'm going to talk to you about today is cognitive flexibility. And that's the ability to switch between the gears in our brain and adjust to the changes and the demands and the priorities and the perspectives that are all around us every single day. So I'm doing it right now. Can hear my dogs telling me that there's something going on downstairs. I think they're going to be okay because I know who's coming through that door. So I'm going to tune that out and I'm going to concentrate on you guys, at least until they ramp it up, and then I might have to go and sort them out. So that's the first one, cognitive flexibility. The second executive function that I want you to remember and take away today is working memory. So the ability to be able to mentally hold information and use it. And when we talk about working memory, we're talking about new information. So when we're learning, we're operating, and I always point to this part of my brain. I have no idea whether that's actually where the working memory is. But this is the new stuff that we're learning right now. And for our little ones, there's a lot of new learning going on, isn't there, every day? So we are asking them to use that working memory a lot. Anything they already know is committed to their long-term memory. So what we need them to do is to take the things that we're planting in their working memory and practice and practice and practice and practice them so that they end up in the long-term memory. But it's hard work working from your working memory all the time. Don't we know it? The third one is inhibitory or impulse control. And that's the ability to master your thoughts and your impulses and to resist temptations. And I love the fact that I'm delivering this training in January. How many of us set a New Year's resolution and we've already broken it? I think this one, the inhibitory control, is the one that I particularly, and probably many other people, are the worst at. It's just managing the distractions and trying to build good habits. I'm trying to break the bad one, and that ability to pause and to think before acting. And all 3 of these things are so much harder. So cognitive flexibility, working memory, and inhibitory control are so much harder to do when you're tired. So for some of our little ones, if they haven't had enough sleep the night before, then they are going to really struggle with those 3 things. Are there any questions at this stage? I've just waffled at you for a good few minutes. Does anybody want to make a comment or ask a question at this stage?
Can I just mention something? Because I feel like what you were saying a little bit, it's a bit like learning to drive a car in some way. Because like when you're first learning to drive a car, you are really having to concentrate on all of the actions that you have to do. And as the years go on, obviously I'm a safe driver, but I'm driving along, I'm singing, I'm kind of thinking what I'm going to have for tea, I'm changing lanes, all that type of thing. And it's kind of become second nature more in the long-term memory. It's just quite interesting, that, isn't it?
That's a really good, thank you, Jo. That's a really good analogy to use, isn't it? That probably will help all of us. And that works until you get a new car. And then it all goes to pot for a little while, doesn't it? And I always find if I get a new phone or a new bit of technology, I feel all at sea for a minute until I've mastered it again. So we have to go back through the stages of those executive function until we've mastered it and committed it to long-term memory. Yeah, thank you, Dave. Really helpful. So moving on then, thinking about how we support executive functions in children, and we're going to do a lot more on this in a minute, so the session will get a lot more interactive in just a moment. But I wanted to show you this slide because it came out of a project that Cambridge University did called Cambridge Africa, and in fact that all the last 3 slides are from a flyer that they produce. If you're interested in having it for your setting and you can't find it on Google, let me know and I'll send it to you. But I wanted to reassure you, because when you read all of these activities on this slide about the ways that we support executive function, you'll realise that you are already doing it. You're already supporting children's executive function. There's nothing new here. So those daily conversations that you're having and that you're encouraging children to have with each other, the opportunities that you plan for children to take turns, the storytelling that not only that you do with children, but that you encourage them to do to each other, listening time and listening games, memory games. I think we sometimes underestimate the importance of these games. Our routines and structure, very important for managing executive function as well as just gently extending it. Fantasy play, following rules, sharing ideas and working together are all really, really good things that you're doing day in, day out with your children, just as a matter of course. And in those activities, we're rarely exercising one executive function at a time because they are so interlinked. But having the knowledge to be able to isolate them gives us the skill to create small steps of progression for children where we've identified that they've either got a strength and we want to push them on a bit, or that they're having some challenge in an area. So I'm talking not only about SEN, because that's what I bang on about every single day, but also your ordinarily available provision and your universal provision can also be enhanced by understanding a child that might be having some difficulties in this area, or a child that might be showing you that they're quite gifted. You know, those are our future CEOs, potentially our leaders of the future, because they can coordinate in their brain so well. We know that autism, ADHD and deafness, I mean, those are just 3 that I've had some experience of. We know that they all pose challenges for the development of executive function. And I haven't got time to go too deeply into why, but if you've got children who have a diagnosis of any of those 3 things, do get in touch if you want to have a chat. So when we can provide really targeted interventions for these children, then we can turn things around for them and create optimal outcomes. And we'll have a little look on the next slide about why that is so important. So on this chart, you can see in a bit more detail exactly how executive function supports just about every aspect of our lives. So keeping us mentally healthy, physically healthy, keeping us out of the criminal justice system, keeping us in work, keeping us in relationships. That all comes from being able to focus, behave, attend, and I'm not just talking about listening and attention, I'm talking about attend to work, attend to people we love, attend school. So our education, our relationships, our health, our finances, they're really important things, aren't they? And I think it's so important to consider the general well-being of the nation and the children that we're working with. It's not just for school. I'm talking about preparation for adulthood here, and we'll see some examples of that in the video we're going to watch later. And all of the early experiences that we're offering in terms of executive function are providing a really positive environment for children to develop their skills, because school or nursery or childminder setting is a predictable environment for them. That's a really safe space for them to try out some of these skills. But some of our children come from homes where life is unpredictable and maybe unsafe. So we need to know that. So our vulnerable groups of children, or our children who are disadvantaged, they perhaps should be just on our radar as children whose executive function skills might be challenged. And then also, I find it really interesting, and I'm in danger of going down a rabbit hole with this, but in terms of culture, so the nursery that I work at, Ham Drive, we have got a real range of cultures that our children come from. And the different cultures have different value that they place on different skills. So in some cultures, childhood is really valued, and in other cultures it's not. And in some cultures, listening is valued, and game playing with, within the family is valued. And in Japan, which is, it still remains one of the least individualized cultures in the country. They're very big on cooperation in their culture. The research is showing that impulse control is more developed in their children. And just one example is that in Japan, they've managed to hold on to that traditional approach to meal times, where the children wait until everyone has their food before they start eating. And when I grew up, that was the rule in my household, but my husband and I don't quite we don't quite manage that these days. I might bring that back in. And in other cultures like the USA, which is slightly more individualized culture, the research is finding that the impulse control of children is less developed. So it's quite an interesting one to think about. And then across our lifespan, I just thought that this was quite interesting to see. If you're like me in the sandwich generation, where you're dealing with children and parents, it's really interesting to see how the executive function develops and then slightly dips as people get older. So we know, don't we, that everything accelerates and increases between the age of 2 and 5. We know that everything sort of takes off so quickly between 0 and 5, and you can see that on this graph. And then you can see how the development of executive function just naturally grows through time. There are things that you can do to maintain your executive function into old age. Haven't got time to talk about that now, and I haven't got time to talk about that interesting little uplift at the age of around 15, and that's not exact, that teenagers experience. So if you have a teenager in the house or in the family, you're going to know all about this. They have another little uplift, or they don't around 15. And it can be really challenging when their peers have got the hang of something like independent skills and, thinking flexibly, and they haven't. There's a bit of a dissonance there for them, and that can cause some challenges. But we're here to talk about the little ones, so let's focus on them. Okay, we're going to do some practical activities using your skill set now. So if you can use the chat, if you don't mind me looking away from time to time to have a look on my other device, or unmute and chip in to make some suggestions in a minute. I'm going to take you through the 3 executive functions. We're going to play some little activities. Then I'm going to highlight the specific skill that I've asked you to practice in that activity. And then I'm going to ask you how you might plan an activity for a 1-year-old, a 2-year-old, or a 3 to 5-year-old to just practice that one particular skill. So let's look at working memory to start us off. And working memory is a bit like having a notepad in your brain where you can store information to keep it in mind so that it can be accessed again. And it's got a limited capacity. So if the knowledge hasn't properly stuck yet and gone into your long-term memory, it will leak out because you just need to practice it to get it to stick. And if something is brand new, then it needs to stay there for a little while and be rehearsed until it gets committed to long-term memory. And as you can imagine, the working memory needs and also builds on inhibitory control. They work together. So keeping the demand low helps a specific skill to be practiced and explored happily before we have to get into slightly higher demand of things like taking turns, which might not be a skill that the child has yet, or remembering more than one thing at once, which they may not be ready for. And if your working memory is full and someone asks you to do something else that's really hard, so example, get your coat, get your wellies, get your hats, and meet me outside. And the child's going, da, 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 da. And then you add something else, like, oh, you need a drink. then what tends to happen when we do that? When we load them up with too many things, what do we get back? I'll try it out on you in a minute, see what I get back. Yes, definitely. Tears, frustration, anger. And sometimes the children that we're working with, they're dysregulated because while they're still trying to make sense of the world, we've just added another demand to their brain that they absolutely haven't got room for. And I'll give you a quick example because I've got time. On Monday, I was teaching in the deaf resource space where I do 2 days a week. And writing is really tricky for some of our children because they've all got additional complex needs. So they're trying to hold a word in their head, work out how to spell the thing, and then, motor skills to get it on paper. So we're working really gently through and I'm scaffolding them and one of the children is just about to write this phenomenal word that they've just come up with, poised and ready. And another adult comes into the room with some fantastic information about something. So the rest of us, attention diverts to this new fantastic piece of information that's coming in. And we kind of got to seize the moment because this person isn't going to be there for very long. But I watched the child who's just about to write this fantastic word down in their book and they just crumple because they know they can't hold that really clever word and take on the new information that's coming. So I had to do a bit of preparation for adulthood work with that one. And I said, I can see what's happening here. You need to ask us to wait while you write that in your book, don't you? Because otherwise you're going to lose that word and you'll get lots more information, but that word will never be found again. So the child isn't ready to say that type of thing yet. Stop, wait, go. But I'm just gently introducing those sort of self-advocacy skills for them. And you can never start too early with children, helping them to understand that it is important to communicate to someone else. Or feeling a bit uncomfortable because I'm trying to do this and you're asking me to do that. We can start that when they're really little. So does this make sense about the working memory? Yeah. Any comments so far? Anyone struggling? Just check the chat. No, we're all good. So I'm going to get you to do a quick activity to get your working memory engaged, all right? But you have got to promise me that you're going to put your pens down and you're going to sit on your hands because I know what you're all going to do. You're going to reach for a pen. So promise me you're not going to do that. And I'm going to show you 5 numbers. I want you to try and remember these 5 numbers. Give you another 10 seconds to commit them to memory. Okay. Can you say them backwards? Or write them in the chat backwards? Very good. What I'm most impressed about is that people are having a go. I think one of the things I've learned through teaching in mainstream national curriculum is that we put so much pressure on children to get to the right answer first. So yes, you're all right. You've all absolutely nailed that. But even if you were wrong, it doesn't matter. You were still practicing. You were still. I'm not a brain scientist, and I don't know if there's muscles in our brain, but you were exercising that memorization muscle. So well done. Now think about the effort involved. So did you have to say them out loud or did you rehearse them almost in your own inner speech? Or I tend to store things on my fingers. What strategies did you use? Feel free to call out.
So I kind of I said it over my head again and again and again. It's a bit like practicing for a spelling test, isn't it? Kind of like you write it again and again and again.
Yeah. Look, say, cover, right, check. That one. Any other strategies that people used? Oh yeah, that's a good one, Laura. Just remembering it in chunks. Yeah, what a really nice example. And then how did you feel when I asked you to tell me them backwards?
I panicked a little bit at first.
Yeah. So if we call this like a hide and seek activity, I showed you some numbers and then I hid them and I asked you to remember, then how would you play that type of, it's like an object permanence game, isn't it, with your children? How would you do that with a 1-year-old, a 2-year-old, a 3-year-old? I mean, you wouldn't obviously give them numbers to remember, but what would you hide to get them to remember? Well, someone else panicked as well, Joe. You weren't the only one. What activities do you do in your settings already that involve an element of something being uh, held in memory and then revealed again? I think with our little ones, with our babies, it's sort of a peekaboo type thing, isn't it? What about our 2-year-olds and our 3-year-olds?
I was going to say for the preschool, so you like the Kim's game when you have the objects down, you cover them over, take one away and see if they can remember it for the older age group, obviously.
Yeah, definitely. And one of the things we do with deaf children with that one is because when you're deaf, you there's so much that you don't pick up, and collective nouns seem to be an issue. So we'll have a group of vehicles on the Kim's game board that we'll play around with. Maybe start with 3, and if they're getting those, we'll build it up. So you can increase the number and decrease, but then you could increase the range. So you could have vehicles and animals, or yeah. See, there's a nice. I'm not going to apologise for this. I'm really big on progression ladders. So if I'm going to play Kim's game, I want to know where to take it next. If they've got it, or if they haven't got it, I want to know where to drop back to make it slightly easier. We've got some lovely suggestions also coming through. So thank you for that one. Kim's game is definitely a good one. Yeah, we've got
We have
peekaboo.
Sorry,
Sorry.
Natalie, we have one in our 2-year-old room. We have a box, and inside the box are the little props for the children's favourite songs, and they have a little rhyme, what's in the box, and they do this little rhyme about what's in the box, and then the person will open up and they might give them a little clue. This thing
Yes.
has got, 4 legs or something, and then they're all trying to remember what thing in that box from their favourite songs has got 4 legs, and they'll shout out, I don't know, there might be Baba Black Sheep, or whatever it might be.
Yeah, brilliant. And something I've only learnt recently is that there's a big emphasis. Again, I'm not going to apologise for going on about deaf children, but there's a big emphasis in the world of teaching deaf children to teach them to visualise and to remember things in pictures in their heads. But that's not always an effective coping strategy. So one of the things that I've learnt more recently to do is to talk about the different ways that we remember stuff. So I've got deaf kids who, like me, will take a picture of something and store it in their brain. But I've got other deaf kids who that strategy doesn't work for them, and they'll go more through. They'll work through. Oh, well, I saw a star and I saw a monkey and I saw. They'll go through a list and work their way back. If you say to them, what's got 5 points on it, or shiny, they'll go through the list. So there's loads of different strategies we all use, and I think we need to talk about them more. We've got another suggestion. Thank you for that one. I'm just reading off my other screen. Yes, learning songs and rhymes is a really nice one as well. So, and there's just something very, very important about reciting and singing together, isn't there? So thank you for those. And if we think about a typical nursery session where during the day children have to remember what their way around, remember what happens at tidy up time, remember where their coat and their wellies go, and particularly where their coat and their wellies go if they're wet, might be different to where they go if they're dry. So there's a lot that we ask of children in terms of working memory in the early years. Okay, let's have a look at inhibitory control. Are you ready for this one? Don't worry, you're not all going to have tantrums over this. So inhibitory control is staying focused, waiting, taking turns, being able to park what you want for a moment while something else happens. And we know, don't we, that 3-year-olds may not have the impulse control of a 5-year-old, and 1-year-olds can't be expected to have the impulse control of a 3-year-old. So there's a progression there. So let's have a go. I think we can all unmute and try this at the same time. It won't matter. It's going to be a bit of a cacophony of sound. What I want you to do is see how hard it is to say the colour of the ink rather than the colour that the word is saying. Go.
Green,
Green,
red,
red,
Yellow,
blue,
yellow,
purple,
yellow,
blue,
yellow,
red,
black,
blue, green,
red,
black,
blue,
red, yellow,
green,
red,
black,
black,
red,
purple,
blue, black.
green,
green,
blue, black.
green,
black.
black, red. Goodness me.
So how far did you get? I think I got as far as the first purple word that actually said orange, and I tripped up because I called it blue, and then I had this moment of doubt of, oh, is it purple or is it blue? And I completely lost my concentration there. You all did very well. And someone has just joined us. Welcome. If you don't mind popping your name and your setting in the chat. Yeah, we're about halfway through, so we'll catch you up as we go along, if that's okay. We're just practicing some executive function skills. We're doing very well at it, actually. So what everybody had to do there was say the name of the colour of the print that the word is in, not the actual word. Did you all notice the effort you had to make to override your impulse to make a different choice? You were quite slow. I was too, so it's not unusual. It takes effort, doesn't it, to engage the brain to do the right thing, particularly in January. And it can also be used, this skill can be used to filter out distraction, and that's really hard as well. So reducing background noise is one of the most important things we can do for our youngest children while they're trying to practice something that's new and unfamiliar. And I've written here that sometimes children know what they're meant to be doing but just can't help it. I think we could probably say the same for ourselves, couldn't we? So if this is an exercise in holding back, what sorts of things do you do for children in your planning? What sorts of things do you plan for children of 1, 2, and 3-ish years to help them practice holding back on something? We're all typing in the chat as well as calling out. That's absolutely fine. So one of the examples that I thought of was when you're holding a 1-year-old and their attention is fixed on something or someone, and then you ask them to pay attention to something new. So they might be playing with your glasses or your hair or trying to pull your hearing aids out in my case. And then you introduce them to someone else and you go, hey, look at this person, they're really exciting too. And they've got in that moment got to make a choice between the thing that's really exciting them about you and transfer it to someone else. So it's about paying attention to something new and overriding your impulse to grab those glasses one more time. And then for our 2-year-olds, it could be about managing a distraction. And we can deliberately, when we feel that a child is ready to develop that skill, we can deliberately sabotage their play a little bit to bring in a distraction of something new and different, and then take it away again and see if they can go back to the original toy. And then with our 3, 4, and 5-year-olds, it's as simple as waiting for their turn. Cooking is a good one, where actually cooking is not a good example because they're all so focused, aren't they, on eating the thing at the end, that they tend to be quite good at waiting their turn until it comes to licking the spoon, and then it all goes to pot, doesn't it? So the next one we'll look at is cognitive flexibility.
Can I just say one thing, sorry, on the last slide?
Yeah, sure.
For the we also do something for the that impulse control, which is, I guess, our own little take on, we call it Pandora's box. It's our own take on sort of some of the practices in attention autism. And that's all about, we have a box of things that are quite overstimulating, things we wouldn't normally have in nursery, stuff that's probably quite easy to break, like, I don't know, when you go to a concert and there's somebody selling those little wands that whiz around and they light up, and they, you know, they're an impractical toy for a nursery setting, but they are very stimulating for children. And the children will sit around in very small groups, and it's to help build their ability to have impulse control and also to attend to the activity. And then we'll describe the thing, we'll bring it out, very limited language, and then these visuals, and each child gets this limited time to interact with the thing, and then it goes back in the box, and then it is finished. So we're using very basic signs with it, we're using the box, and we're using these really exciting objects that are not normal nursery fare inside it, and we find that's a really good one for that.
That is a brilliant one, and thank you so much for reminding us of that one. If anybody didn't quite catch the name, that's something, it's called attention autism. We tend to call it attention bucket in our setting because a child may not have the diagnosis of autism yet, so you have to be a bit careful about using the word with parents and other people. But
that's why we call it Pandora's box.
Yeah, love that. You might find that gets magpied. It might appear in some other settings now because that's a great name. So yeah, it's really effective strategy, and if you're interested, I can send you some information on that. Thank you, super helpful. The group ideas is so much better than one person just going, here's an idea. It's so good to hear what you guys are all doing. So and it's really nice for me to go away having learned something from you too. So our final executive function is, of course, cognitive flexibility. And we would call that, as adults, thinking creatively, or blue sky thinking, or outside the box, or innovation. And basically being able to look at things from multiple perspectives. And it's really hard to do if your working memory is full, or if you haven't got the impulse control to stay focused. So you can see how they all lean on each other, all of these three skills. So, is it a 6 or is it a 9? We have to be able to see what someone else can see to be able to change our perception in this particular illustration. So, have a think about some activities that you do with children that encourage them to change their mind or their mindset. What sorts of things do you already do that make them go, oh, okay, never thought of it that way? I think storybooks is one where we just gently introduce something from a different perspective. Like the 3 little wolves and the big bad pig. If they know the story of the 3 little pigs, you can switch it or tell the story from the wolf perspective. But I'm talking about older children here. Please don't panic if your brain has gone blank, because it does take a little while to, and I'm asking you to work with new knowledge here, so I am putting you all on the spot a little bit. I'm going to give you a link to a booklet that will give you loads and loads of ideas from 0 to teenagers for games. So
Sorry, me again.
Yeah,
Just
please
for
go on.
example, so what we do with the children for this and around, you know, several issues around this is we have floor books for the children, so they can do their own documentation of things that feel important to them, and then we discuss that documentation not just with the group that engaged with whatever the activity was, a bit like a scrapbook, I guess, but a bit more in depth. And then those children who did that know a lot about it, they're the knowledgeable ones, and then children who weren't at that experience, they also that's shown to them, and the children who are the experts obviously on that experience start sharing that with children who haven't been in that experience. And then what happens is the children who weren't even there can start to apply that knowledge into a new situation they find. For example, a little while ago we had a bumblebee that we found in the garden. The bumblebee, the children wanted to look at the bumblebee, but they wanted to know, would the bumblebee still sting you if it's dead? Because they knew it was dead. Well, that was the first thing they had to find out, was it dead or was it asleep? Or, we had that whole conversation. So they found that they wanted to put it under the microscope, because we've got a microscope. So they saw that it didn't have a stinger. They couldn't find the stinger anywhere. But they then learned that the legs were fluffy and the wings, they learned all these different things by doing their observations. And then the children who weren't there, they're still very knowledgeable about what the children found out about that bumblebee. Does that make sense? Am I making any sense? I'm not sure.
Yeah, no, that's really good. That's a great example of floor books. That's a wonderful approach, isn't it? By Claire Warden. Is it mind? Yeah, the mind stretches. Yeah, and as simple things like I used to open up the floor book when I managed a preschool, and I'd go in for set times of the day and open up the floor book and go, let's do some writing, and give them all a writing implement and see what came out, and then say to them, oh, your writing's very different to your writing, and they're able to see that they're all making marks, and that's success, and I'm really happy that they're all making marks, and they're all doing it in a different way at the moment, and that's fine, and they're all choosing different colours. So pointing out these things, that we see things differently, is a good way to encourage that cognitive flexibility.
I think also that goes along hand in hand with that is not stealing the children's learning. That's a big thing for me, is don't steal the learning opportunities as they arise. So we had somebody brought in the autumn time, they brought in from their garden a really big marrow, and they just made it a part of a dinosaur, a sort of exploration area. And then suddenly the children noticed this marrow that wasn't there before, and they started having this conversation in the preschool about what was it? Was it a watermelon that had been made the wrong shape? That's what they thought it was. So then we didn't tell them what it was. And I think that's really important for young children, not to give them all the answers. And so they then set about it took all day, and they wanted to know what colour would it be inside. And some of them said, it will be red because it's a watermelon. And then they had all this exploration around it. Then they tried to open it up, but they couldn't open it. They tried to open it with a little butter knife from their cutlery drawer. They couldn't get into it with that. Then they tried a screwdriver. They were trying all these different things. In the end, they had to go to forest school, get the saw, come back, and then they used the saw to open up the marrow. They then found that it wasn't red inside, it was green, but it did have, but then their attention went to the pips inside, and then they ended up planting the seeds of the marrow in some pots. Wow. But it's just that process of not stealing the learning from the experience. I think that helps for this as well.
Talk about mind stretching. I could feel my brain expanding as you described that. It was like, yes, you didn't give them the answers, you got them to work through it. That's such a lovely example. Thank you. And the examples I've got here are all indoor. I'm so ashamed of myself, because I'm very much an outdoor practitioner. So that was a lovely, lovely example. So I've got, with 1-year-olds, you change the location of a hidden toy. So you might put it in a place, first of all, where they would be expecting to find it, like the toy box, and then you move it somewhere else and see whether they can cope with that. And then with your 2-year-olds, you've got your shape sorting. So, you can't ram a star into a circle hole, can you? So you've got to sort of change your mind to try something different. And the same principle applies with insect puzzles, when you get the animals and the cars and things, and a little dugout bit of a puzzle board that you've got to fit it into. Takes a few goes, and that's just a very simple stage of cognitive flexibility. And again, it's worth considering the demands that we place on children's flexibility of thinking throughout the day. So also teaching parents about this, because if children don't know that it's a childminder or a nursery day when they wake up, they might come into you very, very grumpy because no one told them what day it was. They thought it was one of those days where they could watch Bluey on TV all morning, and then actually it was time to get ready and go. So do we give children enough sort of lead-in time to adjust their mindsets for what's coming up next? Okay, so here is a little link to the Early Years Evidence Store, where they've got a section on self-regulation and executive function, which I'm very excited about. And they've got these 5 strands or 5 approaches, if you like, that contain a wealth of resources, and we haven't got time to go into each of them now, but I picked out one called Promoting Talk About Learning. And I think I'm just going to skip the rest of what I was going to say on this slide, because I think we've covered it with the lovely examples that you've all given, and we'll go straight to the video. And then I'd like us just to have a little chat about what we think about the video, because I found it quite a challenging watch at first. So I need to stop sharing. This is my executive function working here, and I need to hop onto Tinternet, as we say down here in Cornwall. Now, would you let me know if you can't hear this? It does take a minute for the sound to kick in. Can you hear that?
I can't hear it, unfortunately. But that might just be me.
No, I can't hear either.
No worries. You all have me nice and emotionally regulated, so I can solve this problem without panicking. Right, let's go back to... Sometimes it's as simple as me clicking a button. There we go. So it's a button. Right, hopefully this will work. If it doesn't, please do say yet again.
What I need to ask you now is
that better?
What do you think we should do with this cake?
Yep,
what we
yep,
gonna
all good.
Do with it?
Cut it in half.
Check it.
Hang on, we've got to count the persons, then we'll cut it up in how many children it is.
Ah, right. Cut it up into how many children there is. Can I tell you what I'm thinking about? What I'm thinking is, I don't know if it seems fair for me to have any cake. I didn't really help with the baking very much, did I, Hercod?
Yeah.
Did I?
Yeah, you put one egg in the bin, and
Oh, that's true.
And then you help us spread
Sit down, Charlotte.
the chocolate into the bowl.
Oh, that's right. I did do 2 things. I did do something to help, didn't I? Okay.
And Dad did a beat.
Did you? What did you do to help?
I just put some butter in and then I went off the plate.
What does everyone think about that?
Well, I don't think he's allowed to have cake and he did in one bit.
Aidan, Freddie doesn't think you should be allowed to have cake if you only helped with 1 bit.
And I know, but you should, because I always got some cake.
Well, you always did in the past, but now we're having this meeting about the cake and
Yeah,
we don't know.
Because if Aidan did 1 bit, I don't think he could have cake. I think him now to have cake.
Theo thinks he should.
And me.
Well, let's talk about you, Charlotte. What did you do to help with the cake? Freddie, what do you think about Charlotte? Do you think Charlotte should have some cake?
Yeah.
Why? What did Charlotte do? Because you said Aidan shouldn't. You said, I'll just remind you, you said Aidan can't have any cake because he only did 1 thing. So why do you think Charlotte should have some?
I don't think she's allowed to have some because she did 1 bit too. I think if 2 persons went away, I could still have cake. Yeah. And me. And me too.
And you think that's okay too, for them to have some. But Freddie doesn't think it's okay. What do you think, Theo? You were the person that stayed right until the end.
I think Charlotte and Aidan allowed some cake. No, because I don't, because they only did 1 of it. Yeah.
And what about Lucy? Should she have some cake?
No. Yeah. No, because she went away too. Because then we already had, and then Yaku went away, so then we only had 1. one and then I went away.
Oh, but
then
hang on a minute. You went away as well?
yeah.
So maybe just Theo should have this cake?
No, but that wouldn't be fair.
It wouldn't be fair. It doesn't feel fair, doesn't it? Not Aiden.
No. I think Freddie made loud something, and everybody else.
And everybody else as well. I think you're very kind, Theo. I think you're thinking about your friends, thinking about how they feel, and you don't want them to feel left out, not getting any cake. Let's have a vote. Let's have a vote. Let's see what everybody thinks. Jacob, do you think that everybody should get a piece of cake?
Yeah.
Or just these people?
Everybody.
You think everybody should. So I'm going to count you on this hand. These are the people who think everybody should have some cake. What about you, Freddie?
I think only me and Theo.
So he thinks only him and Theo should get some.
I
Right?
know.
Huh?
I know, but if two people eat all the cake, that wouldn't be fair either.
So you don't think it's fair if some people get some but they didn't help to bake it. And you don't think it's fair if not everybody gets some. Right, Lucy, what about you? Do you think everybody should get some or just these two?
All of them.
You think all of them. So you're on this hand here. What do you think, Theo?
I think everybody allowed some.
He's thinking about you, Aiden. He's thinking about what you said about it not being fair.
Yeah.
He doesn't want you to feel bad about it.
No.
So generous. It's very generous, Theo. Okay, so let's add Theo in on this hand. On this hand. These are the people who think, yes, everybody should have some cake. Charlotte, what do you think? Do you think everybody should have some?
Yeah.
Yeah. So she's going on that hand. And what about you, Aiden?
I think everybody should get some.
Everybody. So 5 people voted yes, everybody should get some. And only one, that was you, Freddie, said no. So we've got to go with these 5 people who think everybody should. I'm going to ask the person.
Some cake, because then that won't be fair.
Oh, don't worry. That wouldn't be fair if we said, just because you voted that way, that means you can't have any. That wouldn't be fair, wouldn't it not? We're not going to do that.
No.
No.
No, because then I wouldn't be allowed any cake.
No, and that wouldn't be fair. Just because of your opinion, just because of what you think's right. That wouldn't be fair, Freddie, so don't worry. Look what we're going to do. We're going to bring you in with us, and we're going to all be together and all have a piece, yeah?
Just take a moment to appreciate the skill and the executive function that practitioner was using while she delivered that little piece of work. Now, can everybody see my slides again? Lovely. So what did you think of that video?
I think she did really well to not have anybody cry.
Definitely. When I think about my little nursery group, I teach in a nursery on Thursdays and Fridays. I'm not sure that they are ready. Some of them are, but most of them wouldn't be ready. I think we would have some very angry moments.
Yeah, they did very well to contain themselves, didn't they? That was ever so difficult.
Yeah. I loved that bit at the end where Theo felt brave enough to say, oh no, I voted the other way and now I'm not going to get any cake. So he felt safe enough to express his worry. And that lovely, that's the bit that I thought was real preparation for adulthood, where the teacher said to him, just because your opinion was different, it doesn't mean that you're not getting cake. So we're bringing you in. It's just a beautiful moment. And I think he was such a black and white character up until that point, wasn't he? It's given him a really nice example of how just because you believe one thing, it doesn't exclude you. So he got brought in to have a bit of cake.
Yeah.
I thought it was a good example of what you were saying earlier about progression ladders as well. So these children have obviously already got quite a good level of executive function to be in this group, to be having this conversation. It wouldn't be for all children in every setting, would it? But actually having them as part of their progression ladder, I thought it was good. And the only thing I would have perhaps done is have like we've got little mini me's that we register that each child registers themselves with in the morning, and they could have perhaps used something visual, a picture for them to do the voting, because I think it's quite hard on a hand to remember which hand was I on, or or
Yes.
part of that process. But might have been a good progression thing on the ladder as it was.
Yeah. I'd like to think that perhaps these are children, it's summer term and they've been at the setting for a whole year rather than, October, November, and these children are just like, wow. So, that gives us hope, doesn't it? We could get some children there by the end of just the academic year. And I think it certainly challenged me, because I thought, first of all, when I watched it, I thought, oh my gosh, I wouldn't ask children to do that. There would be tantrums. And then the more I thought about it and I went back over it, I thought, actually, there are some children who could cope with that now, and I'm not actually giving them the opportunity, because I'm constantly trying to scoop up the ones that aren't there yet. So if I took off the able children and gave them that is progressing them in a way that they need. Just a lot of food for thought in that one. And there's loads of these videos on the evidence store, and they're really good conversation starters if you get all your colleagues together and want to sort of thrash it out. They're really good for that. So finally, I'm going to share with you these resources as promised. So the one on the top is the resource that will take you from birth right through to adolescence in terms of developing children's executive function skills. And you will look at it and you will see activities in there that you do day in, day out, week in, week out with your cohorts. So it's a really reassuring document. But because they specify which skill it's predominantly focusing on, it's really useful when you come to sort of setting little targets for children in terms of developing their skills. So that's really useful. I will send the slides out so that you can follow all these QR code links at your leisure. And then the resource at the bottom is actually a website called Reflection Sciences, and that's the best progression ladder that I've found, that outlines the starting point, and then the skill development that you move through in terms of rough ages and stages for executive function development. So when you're again thinking about targeting specific areas of challenge for children, and maybe writing IEPs, or even just in your planning targeting things, you can pitch it just right, and if they don't quite get it, you can drop down a level, and if they fly through it, you can move on up. So I hope that's really helpful for you. I am going to hang around for 5-10 minutes if anybody wants to talk about a specific child, but please, I know you're all very busy people, and I really appreciate the time that you've taken to come out of practice and share with us today. If you wouldn't mind letting us know how we did, your feedback is really important, because it helps us to provide more of this type of thing for you. And the reason I'm standing here today talking to you about executive function is because either yourselves or your fellow practitioners asked for it. So we're here to provide what you need. So please do fill out our evaluation form. And yeah, feel free to go and carry on with the rest of your day. I'm going to come out of screen sharing now and just hang around for 5 minutes if anyone does want to talk about a specific child. And I will also stop the recording. How good is my working memory? Let's see if I can actually do it. Stop recording. There we go.